Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, where our job is to help you build visibility, professional credibility, and connection with your ideal client by putting the human at the centre of innovative marketing, so you can build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship with your ideal clients. I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm honoured that you're here with me. If you haven't joined our wonderful marketing transformation community yet, go to innovabiz.co and collect your free gift as well. Do subscribe to the show and also leave a review because it helps others find us. Let's get into today's masterclass on this InnovaBuzz podcast.
If we want to achieve crazy big goals, it's mandatory that we will fail along the way. And if that's mandatory, then instead of trying not to fail, why shouldn't we just embrace failure, take it for what it is, learning and growing? And by doing that, by having that healthy relationship with failure, we can speed up the process and achieve the success that we really want.
Welcome back. I hope you've had an awesome week so far. If you haven't yet listened to my recent conversations with author of Marketing with Webinars, Tom Poland, and with marketing strategist Ardith Elby, then do check them out. Only after you've listened to today's conversation, of course. I'm really excited today to have on the InnovaBuzz podcast as my guest, Miha Matlievski. He's also known as the Fail Coach. Miha is a serial entrepreneur with 23 years of experience that has grown and scaled 9 companies over 7 to 9 plus figures in different industries all around the world. Miha has personally generated over $3 billion in sales and has been a part of many joint ventures and partnerships where he's been able to generate $24 million in funding. His Operation Firehouse teaches 7+ figure entrepreneurs how to go from working 60 to 70 hours per week to managing their company with 4 to 6 hours per week. And who wouldn't want that? In our discussion today, Miha talked to me about embracing failure as feedback and learning from it. We talked about using an ideal role avatar. And we talked about Firehouse time versus Firehose time. Without further ado, then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Miha Matlievski. Hi, I'm your host Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today from Serbia all the way in Europe, Miha Matlievski. Miha is the Fail Coach, and he's also host of the Coffee Conversations with Miha LinkedIn Live show. Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, Miha. It's a great privilege to have you as my guest.
Hello. Hi, Jürgen. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and to get to know your audience just the way my audience got to know you a few weeks ago.
Yeah, we had a fun conversation then. And Tommy Breedlove, another fun conversation I had on episode 437 of the InnovaBuzz podcast, suggested that we have a conversation with you, and he introduced us. So big hello to Tommy.
Yeah, very big hello to Tommy. He's just a wonderful human being, making great connections all over the world.
Yeah, that's right. So he's based in the US. I don't remember the town. I think it might be Texas somewhere. And he connected us from Australia to Europe.
Yes.
All right. Now, the Fail Coach. I'm really curious to understand the background behind that, and also, learn from your many years of experience in business in many different areas. But before we get started on that, what's the impact you're making in the world, Miha?
Well, I would say that there are 2 impacts. One would be I'm very passionate about helping with saving animals, stray animals. So that's something that's very close to my heart. And the other one I would say is when you see your clients grow, and we have a vision statement at Fail Coach that says that we create servant leaders. And, by definition, servant leaders, they are not in it just for themselves, but they want to make an impact. And it's so lovely to see how they choose different causes that they're passionate about, and making this world a better place, one little step at a time.
I love it. And stray animals, that's an interesting one, juxtaposition to the work you do in business.
Well,
how did that come about?
With me, there's always a story behind it, and not to go too long, but as a fail coach, I had to first fail myself a lot to be able to, get that nickname. And after that big failure in 2009, where I lost everything in just one single day and ended up $5 million in personal debt, months later, I had to go through a lot of depression, anxiety. I came very close to committing suicide. And if it wasn't for my dog Happy, I probably wouldn't be around. But because of him, I was like, what will happen to him? And that gave me the strength to start picking myself back up. And once I solved, all my problems, once I exited, then later a startup I created and scaled very fast, I just said, I have to give back to, the animal community the way he saved me. Now it's time for me to save a few lives.
I love it. So you talked about failure and pretty big failure where you were deep in personal debt and it impacted on your emotional well-being. Apart from your dog Happy, and you said, well, what will happen to him? What was the turnaround point where you said, okay, I can move forward from here. Things will get better if I do certain things.
Well, the first thing, it was a two-part thing. The second part came years later, but the first thing was, the way I tried to commit suicide was jumping from a balcony. Not the smartest way to do it. You fall down and it can hurt a lot. So I don't know why didn't I chose some easier way, like, taking a bunch of pills. But I was on the balcony. I was on the other side of the fence already, and I was just hanging with one hand, grasping the fence and looking down. And it was at that moment when it really hit me that everything that happened to me, the good and the bad, was really just my fault. Because before that moment, the good things, of course, they were, my fault, but the bad things, I always found somebody else to blame. 2009, the financial crisis, the government not doing enough, la-di-da-di-da, a whole bunch of excuses. And, I felt like a victim. And it was at that moment when I realized that it really wasn't anybody else's fault. It was my fault. My companies didn't have strong foundations, and this was missing, that was missing. And that gave me that empowerment when I realized, if I change, if I do things better, I can actually do better. And those things will never happen to me again, or not in that extent. But then later on, many years later, as I was starting to talk more about the topic and things like that, and that's where I got the nickname, the Fail Coach. I didn't came up with it. I was given the nickname. But the thing was that the longer the time went and me doing a lot of reflection on the past, I started understanding that failing is really nothing else but growth opportunity. And if you have healthy relationship with failure so that you don't go down the rabbit hole and so on, it can actually be an amazing tool or an amazing thing, that helps you grow much, much faster and achieve success much, much faster. And, let's be real. When you're an entrepreneur, you're often trying to achieve something you haven't achieved before. So you're going for a bigger, greater goal. And when you're doing that, you're doing things for the first time. When you grow from 50 employees to 1,000 employees, there's a whole lot of things that you'll do for the first time. And on our first try, we usually fail in anything, whether that's, riding a bicycle or trying to walk as a baby. Usually the first few tries we fail, and then slowly we pick ourselves up and we get better and better and better. And, so if we want to achieve crazy big goals, it's mandatory that we will fail along the way. And if that's mandatory, then instead of trying not to fail, why shouldn't we just embrace failure, take it for what it is, learning and growing? And by doing that, by having that healthy relationship with failure, we can speed up the process and achieve the success that we really want.
Yeah, I love it. My business coach likes to say that there's no such thing as failure. It's just all feedback. And I think that's possibly an expression of what you're saying there. But I like, the idea that when we first started walking, every single child, when they first started walking, they fall over pretty quickly. As soon as they let go of whatever it is they're holding on to, when they learn to stand up, and then they walk along the furniture or walk along some adult's hand, and as soon as they let go the first time, they fall over. And none of us have then said, "Oh, I failed, I give up." So pretty well everybody's walking, and then society kind of educates us that subsequent failures are actually a bad thing. How can we kind of come back to that mindset of, "Oh, I fell over, I'll have to get up and try this again, and maybe what can I learn from that? How do I do it differently?"
Well, you said it yourself, when we are learning to walk or learning to ride a bicycle or making, bread for the first time or a risotto or something, if we don't have huge emotions attached to it, maybe you're making a risotto for, a special someone. You'll have probably quite high expectations, especially if that's early in the dating stage. You might want to think, "Oh, if the risotto is good, we have a few glasses of wine, and, this night might continue into breakfast." When we have high emotions attached to a task, then if we fail, we have highly emotional reaction to it. So to establish healthy relationship with failure, we have to become more logical and not focus on the end result, but really logically understanding that result was just a finish line of a certain process, and look at the process, figure out the bottlenecks, figure out maybe wrong steps in the process. Maybe we added too much liquid to the risotto or too little liquid, or maybe we used the wrong cheese that didn't melt the way it should, and so on. And so that's how we have to shift. And then we immediately start seeing the lessons there when we look at the process. Now, of course, when something like that happens to you in that moment, we all get emotional reactions. And I've learned, and this is something that I work very closely with my clients, that mindfulness, mindful meditation, and just mindfulness in general, being mindful throughout the day, helps us to snap out of that moment, to realize, "Oh, this is happening. Ooh, I'm having a huge emotional reaction. Okay, what do I need? I need to just go out and do a 10-minute walk, or I need to do some breathing or something. I need to bring myself back. I need to ground myself from that emotional reaction." When we are able to achieve that, then once we are grounded, it's very easy to look at the processes. And once we do that, a lot will change and the way we react to things. And then we can start picking up the lessons. We can start doing, I have certain routines that I put my clients through. Like at the end of the day, we have reflect, figure out what lessons we can learn from the day, small or big, and then action planning. How can I implement those lessons tomorrow so that tomorrow I do things better. And the goal is to just be 1 or 2% better next day. Over time, that compounds into a whole lot.
I love it. Yeah. It's interesting you brought up the example of the risotto on the date night. You reminded me of the first time I invited my wife, my then new girlfriend over for dinner, and I cooked a roast, and I with the roast for the very first time, it's a bold move. For the very first time, I made spätzle, which is a local dough specialty. You know that, yeah, from our area, and they're actually very. There's a technique to making them, and I'd seen my mother make them, I'd seen my grandmothers make them, but I'd never actually paid exact attention to what to do. I knew the ingredients. I made them, and they go into water, boil in water, and it all clumped up into one huge lump, which is clearly wrong and probably wouldn't have been very nice. And just then the doorbell rang. She arrived. So before I let her in, I threw it in the rubbish bin. I let her in and I said, I'm going to have to try this again. So yes, it was quite high level of emotion, just as you described.
Yeah, and then, when that happens, then we can go into those rabbit holes and negative self-talk and things like that, yeah.
But luckily, the next batch still wasn't that good, but it was better. It was edible, and we have been married for over 40 years, so something must have worked out. So you can embrace the failure.
Yes.
So you talked about mindfulness. What exactly do you mean by that? Because a lot of people use this word, and I always wonder, well, what do they mean by that? Because it is a big term. It could embrace a whole lot of different things.
Well, for me, that's really just simply being mindful, so being present, being in the driver's seat and not, letting the autopilots get in the way. Because we human beings, we are designed to switch on the autopilots. I mean, that's how we breathe. That's how we do a whole lot of things, is on autopilot. But that's not always a good thing, especially when we are aiming for something new, because, what got you here might not get you there. So you might have to do different things. So, you might need to create new autopilots, but that time in between, the old autopilot and the, desired new autopilots, you have to be in the driver's seat. You have to be present. You have to, be in the moment so that you can correct and not switch on the old autopilots. And it's really just that, being present throughout the day, and practicing mindfulness now for since 2012. What's that? 9 years. I think I can honestly say that I spent about 90% of my day being very present, catching myself in different moments, taking time to reflect when I see that it's needed, and, doing decompression stuff. So when I see some huge emotions boiling up, I quickly do a mindful meditation, go for a quick walk, play with my dog. It's just, something that grounds me back. And that's how I understand mindfulness in this particular way, that will help you dealing with failures and trials and testing and innovation and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, I like it. So essentially, it sounds like what you're describing is kind of almost like taking a third person look. So step back from whatever has triggered that emotion, step back and then kind of look at it almost as a third person, as an audience member, and then you can be a little bit more objective about, okay, what's going on? What was the trigger here? And how can I react? Making the choice to react perhaps in another way than the first emotional response.
Yes, because very often we human beings, we think that we don't have choices, that we don't have a choice how we react, how we see something. Last year, Corona, many entrepreneurs felt like they can't control anything, but in reality, we can control how we react to that particular thing. We can, we have a choice what we will do, how we will change, pivot, shift, do this, do that. So yeah, we have a whole lot more control and choice than we give ourselves credit for. We think that most of the things, it just is what it is, but that's not the truth. It is when you're on autopilot, but when you switch off the autopilot, you have all the choices in the world.
Yep. That's great advice. So you talked earlier on about not having the fundamentals in place in those early businesses that then resulted in things collapsing when there were, the external environment changed. What are talk to us about some of those pillars that need to be in place to have a business be more resilient to external environments like COVID, for example, or going back to the days of the financial crisis?
Well, I mean, most entrepreneurs, when we start a business, we focus on marketing and sales. And then, we focus on, okay, so now I have to deliver what I sold, whether that's a product or a service or whatever. But then we skip on so many other things, and we just have to look at the business holistically. Yes, marketing and sales and delivery will get you to a certain point in a stable economical, macroeconomical environment. But when those things start shifting, if you don't have, good cash flow, if you don't have any reserves, if you don't have systems and processes in place, if things are not duplicatable, if you rely too much on persons and not on a system. So, for any business to be able to grow and especially to scale, everybody needs to be able to walk away from the business, and the business still has to go forward. So the only way to achieve that is with good system. Then, we don't have systems and processes in place. We don't have any KPIs, benchmarking, any way to logically figure out where we are, what's happening, because, lack of sales, you most often you will not see change for a few months, because the client journey usually takes some time from know to like to trust. And if something's happening on the know part, the sales will be impacted only later on. And if you don't have any KPIs in place of how you monitor the client journey, at one point you will be, I don't have any new clients coming in. And if you start dealing with it then, and that your client journey takes, a month to build to the point of trust where they start buying from you, well, and if you don't have any cash reserves, any cash flow reserves, that month might kill you. I mean, have you bankrupt. My businesses in the past, were really like that first house from the Three Little Pigs story. And, when the crisis back in 2008 and 9, when that wind came, just like from the wolf in the story, they all collapsed immediately because there was no foundations in place. I had marketing, I had sales, and we were delivering what we sold, but none of the rest was in place. And again, in a good macroeconomic environment, that might be good, because Jürgen, you probably remember years before that crash, 2005, 6, 7, it was booming. Everything was booming. I mean, if you were an entrepreneur and you were walking down the street next to a bank, the bank was throwing money at you just to do something with it. Of course, they made you sign a whole lot of all the things that, you will vouch for that money with your personal belongings and everything. But at that time, nobody was thinking, a crisis is coming. So we were all like, more money. Sometimes we were driven by some greed as well, because we wanted to just grow. When things got tough, it was just so easy to crash without any of the other, foundations in place. And especially what's true for entrepreneurs is that we often really just look at the front-facing things. So marketing, sales, delivery, what bringing cash flow in. But we don't look at back-end stuff like finances, like legal, like HR, like systems and processes. That's all the boring stuff. And so we avoid it as much as we can. But again, you can go for a certain amount of time and you can achieve. I've had clients who achieved multi-seven-figure results by not having foundations in place in good macroeconomic environment. But at some point, not having foundations, the back-end foundations in place, will stop that growth and can even put you at a place where you start declining.
Yeah, well, thanks for going through all that. I mean, there's so much to unpack there, and I think the lesson is pretty clear. There's a lot of things, and systems and processes is one that I talk about a lot. That's something that I'm probably very good at, and maybe even too focused on at times. But certainly, if I see a business that doesn't have that in place, I'm always very wary, because it's like you say, that they're so dependent on the people that know how to do things, that if those people, even if they're just sick for a week, things go off the rails very quickly.
Yeah. Things can happen. They might, I don't know, their spouse might get a lifetime opportunity and they have to just the whole family move, and they come to you and say, hey, we got this opportunity. We have to take it. I mean, they're not, co-owners. They're just employees. And if they find a better opportunity, maybe they're headhunted by a competitor and they get, maybe, I don't know, it's a young family. They want to buy a house. The competitor gives them better paycheck. And, they think, oh, with better paycheck, I can get better solution at the bank for the mortgage. And, anything can happen. They can go skiing, fall and end up in hospital for 2-3 weeks. So there's plenty of things that can really happen. And so relying on people with, name and surname, is not the way to grow your business. You have to rely on a system. Be very clear on the roles. So when we work with our clients, every company has organizational chart, but none of them have role charts. So ideal role avatar. And then we put, hard skills, soft skills, personality traits, behaviors, that are necessary for that particular role. And then of course, that needs to match with the hiring and the company culture and the values of the company. So yeah, quite a lot of things to unpack for one podcast episode.
Yeah. I love the ideal role avatar. I've used this in the past as well, because we do this exercise with coming up with the dream customer profile. And I thought, gee, that could be used for defining
everything.
Employees, and the role.
Yeah.
So,
employees. If you're going for a business partner, for a co-founder, make sure that you make an ideal partner avatar. If you are a startup and you want to go for exit, because, depending on who your ideal exit avatar is, you might drive how you do things in the company differently. If you want to be bought by your competitor, maybe you will focus on the KPI of growing client list, because that's what they might be most interested in. If you want to be bought by an investor, purely financial investors, then you will focus on the balance sheet, on profit and loss statement, on profitability, and so on. So all those decisions, how you run your company, might be very different based on what exit scenario you want to go for. And if you're not clear who your ideal exit avatar is, then you'll do a little bit here, a little bit there, and that will just slow down progress. That will slow down momentum. You will use too much resources because you're battling too many different battles at the same time. So the more clarity you have, the more you can really focus your resources, create more momentum, and get there faster.
Yeah, that's a great tool, and I think I need to suggest it to more people and use it in more situations. So the idea of embracing failure and having a healthy relationship with it, how do you bring that? Because you talked about culture and, in hiring employees, that cultural fit was one of the big things. How do you kind of build that into the culture of your organization, that acceptance of failure, that idea that failure is just something to learn from?
Well, first you need to have the breakthrough with the owners. They are driving the culture. Everything in business starts at the top with the leadership. So if they're not living what's on the piece of paper, well, then nobody will in the company. So first they need to really embrace that and start living that and showing with examples, with reactions when something bad happens, with good reactions, showing, like people in our business, our employees, and please, hopefully nobody will be offended by this, but they're like little children, looking at their parents. So when you're a leader, when you're at the top, you're like a parent, and children, they don't usually listen to parents. They do what parents do. They pick up the behaviors of parents, right? And the same is true with the employees. The employees, they're looking at their leaders, and if the leaders are saying one thing but then doing another thing, well, then you have a problem, and then you have problem with culture. So first, really, the top leadership needs to embrace that. Even when I'm working, because sometimes I'm get hired by Fortune 500 companies, and I work with top leadership in those companies on this particular matter. I even worked with two of the big four on those topics. Yes, NDA, so I can't really name most of those clients, but if the leadership doesn't embrace that and really start living, there is no way that you can push that down. And then once the leadership embraces that and really starts living that, but one thing is showing with example, leading with example, and the other one is some good internal PR, because people forget. If you just tell them something one time, well, it might stick for a week, but then, the autopilots kick in and they will forget. So you really need to create a very good internal PR plan to reinforce company culture and those things that go into company culture.
Yeah, so I love it. So it's really behavior, leading by examples, and then reinforcing the message often.
Yes.
Great. All right. You also talked about fast scaling businesses, that when you came out of those failures and started again and realized there were some choices that you had that you could do differently. And so what are some of the things for those that are really looking to grow very quickly, some of the key things that they need to do?
Well, first of all is you need to really start with a solid due diligence in the beginning. So when we are hired by startups, we start with the due diligence. Why? Because we really need to understand everything that's going in the company. And if you just talk with the founders, they might see it one way, but it might not be always the correct way, because it's filtered through how they see the world around them. And then after that, you make a 2-year plan, which is really then quarter by quarter for the next 2 years. And you have to start with the end first. So first figuring out, why do we want to scale? What's the end result of that? Like this year we had 2 exits. So 2 of our clients had exits, and at one client, the goal was that the owners want to exit before the exit. Why? Because they don't want to be locked in. And, we had to put all those things in place, an exit strategy like that, so that it really happened in that way. And then they went from a small 6-figure startup. I think, if I remember correctly, they were making less than $500,000 a year when we started 2.5, 3 years ago. And in 2.5 years, we laid down all the foundations. We took care of the scaling. We did the exit before exit. Then we went for exit scenario with a buyer. And just a few months ago, they were acquired for $55 million.
Yeah, that's impressive. So it's kind of working the goal out, working the end result, and going backwards, having done the due diligence.
Yeah. And most often when it's scaling, you really need outside help. Top leadership really needs that outside help because so much is happening on a daily basis. Things can get very emotional and you just need. So for those high scaling companies, I have something that I call Miha in your pocket. Because it's just an app, Voxer, just like WhatsApp and so on. I just wanted to have one that's only for clients so that I don't have other messages. And really we interact through that app, on a daily basis, multiple times a day. So every few hours, we do a little recap and re-strategizing and reshifting priorities and so on. And when you pair that together, then yes, you can really scale fast. So we just did a case study. And, if any of your audience wants to see that, it's 8 pages long, but it's a really, done as a case study. So showing the whole process with the graphs, with naming the company, everything, in 1 year, 3 times increase in revenue, with one company here from Serbia. And then we laid everything, what was the before situation, all the process that we went through with all the graphs that are supporting everything. And they achieved 3 times more revenue with almost the same number of employees, which shows you how much they improved the whole system and process. And we laid everything in that document. So again, it's 8 pages long, but if anybody wants that PDF, they can hit me up and I will be very happy to send it their way. And even just by reading that process, they can have a lot of ideas what they can do in their business to lay down strong foundations.
Sounds like a wonderful resource. I might have to have a look at it myself. All right. Well, I think it's a good point now to transition into the buzz, which is our lightning round, where I ask my guests the same 5 questions each episode. And the idea is that you'll share some tips from your experience that'll inspire the listener to go and do something awesome as a result today. So you ready?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. So what do you think the number one thing is anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Fail more. Well, failure drives innovation.
Yeah. I thought you might say that. And embrace failure as opportunities to learn from.
Yes, develop healthy relationship towards failure and then fail fast, fail forward.
Great. Love it. All right. What's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
A lot of Firehouse time. So not being on the fire ground, but spending a lot of time in the Firehouse, strategizing, thinking. Firehouse really just means going, to sit next to water. For me, water is something that really sparks the creativity and calms me down. To sit next to a river or sea, and really just Firehouse, think strategically. So everything in business, I approach it in the same way. Strategy first, plan, and then execution. Most entrepreneurs just go straight into the execution phase, and then there's no plan, no strategy behind it. They don't have any clarity on KPIs, benchmarking, stuff like that. And then we get to the point where we think or we feel that something is working or not working, or we can't decide whether to continue certain activity or not. But you should eliminate that as much as possible in running a business.
Yeah, I love it. And getting away from the business into nature is a really good way to kind of be a little bit more mindful as well, isn't it? To sort of take that almost what we were talking about before, the third party observer kind of role.
And that's, another example would be When there's war, it's not the soldier in the front line that wins the battle. It's the general on the top of the hill being, in the firehouse, overlooking, seeing, strategizing, planning. And that's what you have to do as the CEO, as the director of the company. That's where you need to spend most of the time, in the firehouse, not on the fireground.
All right. Do you have a favorite resource you use most often?
Well, my favorite resource is really a bunch of coaches and consultants that I have in my network, and we often have get-togethers, whether that's one-on-one, or we set up certain masterminds and so on, and really just talking things through with my network. I've spent the last 25 years building an amazing network of people who really are excellent experts in their own fields, and having a chat with them, I think there's no better resource, at least for me, than I call it the leverage of trust.
Great. I love it. Okay. And what's the best way to keep a client on track? You kind of alluded a little bit to some of the elements before, I think.
Well, we have to realize that sharing the knowledge, or the knowledge exchange, the knowledge transfer, is the easiest part of, coaching, consulting, whatever we do. The much harder part is implementation. So, keeping them accountable and helping them with, properly planning and seeing things from the outside. You'll see with all of us, we all overestimate how much we will do in a day, which is completely unrealistic. We're very optimistic about how much we think we will accomplish, and then, we don't. Just supporting them throughout the implementation process. That Miha in your pocket thing that I mentioned. I hate using the 10x thing because, Grant Cardone is using that word. So I really don't like to use it, but I can honestly say that, we've seen 10x on the speed, how people go from one stage onto the other, when they use the Miha in your pocket. We really do, because it's the implementation stage that's always the hardest.
Yeah, and being able to talk to somebody basically any time that they feel stuck, perhaps, or they're facing a decision where it might not be really clear cut. Is this the best way to go, or is the other choice the best way?
Yes.
Great. I'll have to keep that one in mind. And what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Talk to people. Talk to your ideal client avatars. Put some hypothesis out there on a piece of paper who you think your ideal client avatar is or are, and then go out and talk to them. I mean, unless you are a big business with a lot of cash flow to burn through, and you can use, focus groups and whatnot, and data-driven research and so on. If you are a small entrepreneur or just starting out, just go out, talk to people, and just be curious. Listen, ask questions, listen, be curious. They'll tell you everything. And then if you put those things together, you can have an amazing product market fit, and then your unique value proposition will come out of that as well.
Yeah, I love it. It's such a simple concept, and yet not many people really do it, do they?
Yes, I see with almost all my clients, that's the one thing that they want to skip. They would rather, spend hours on Google researching and reading posts and blogs and this and that. But it's really the easiest thing. Just a few days ago, we have a new client, and he told me how he spent 2 hours while driving listening to a course that he bought on product development because they want to develop a new product. And I was like, well, imagine if you would spend those 2 hours talking to 4 people who fit your ideal client avatar, how much you would learn, because right now you got a lot of theory, but you still have no clue on the problems and the solutions that the ideal client avatar is wanting and needing, and if you can fill that gap. If you would talk with 4 people for 30 minutes while doing that same drive, right now, we would have so much more to talk about. But yeah, it just doesn't come naturally to most people. Even the people who are very chatty ones, when it comes to doing this research, it gets into their head, and you really have to close your head, come from the heart, and really just be curious as a kid, asking a whole bunch of questions, being present in the moment, record the call, go back to it later, make notes later, just have fun.
Yeah, I love it. And you talked about servant leadership at the outset, and I think that's a really great embodiment of servant leadership to me.
Yes, I mean, I'm a firm believer that politicians and world leaders are just in it for their own ass, and that the only people who are servant leaders are fellow entrepreneurs. And, it's on us entrepreneurs to change this world for the better. And the more servant leaders are there, the better this world will be.
Great. Well, thanks, Miha. This has been fabulous. Now, where can people find out more about you? Maybe even reach out to say thanks for what you've shared today, and also get a hold of the case study document.
Well, the easiest is if they connect with me on LinkedIn. So that's by far the easiest. I love connecting with people. But if they just want to, dive into a little bit more without having to talk to me, then the best thing is just to type into Google fail coach. I'm still the only fail coach in the world. So all the resources that you get on the first 2 or 3 pages of those Google results will point into some of the directions, and then they can choose whatever they prefer to dive in.
Great. Okay. And we'll include your LinkedIn profile and the Fail Coach link in the show notes. Do you have some parting advice for our listener today as we wrap this up?
Well, there's one thing that I always like to say at the end when I'm given the opportunity, and that is stay humble, because when you get too cocky, things go wrong. Be grateful, because so much of the time we think about what's not working, but we overlook celebrating even the little wins on a daily basis. And then, like I said, fail fast, fail forward with healthy relationship towards failure. And I think if they follow that, they will be in an amazing place when it comes to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it's a great mantra to live by. So thanks for that. And finally, Miha, who else should I get on this show and why?
I have so many ideas. I think one gentleman, Brendan, he was my guest on the LinkedIn Live just a few weeks ago. He's amazing at helping people with communication, public appearances, and just communication, internal and external within the company and outside towards clients and so on. I think he would be an amazing value to your listeners. So I will be very happy to make the introduction if you will want so, Jürgen.
Okay, that sounds like a fascinating topic to explore and have a conversation over. So yeah, we'll get that introduction to Brendan from you and invite him onto the show as well. So thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights so generously with us today, with me today, and I've really enjoyed having you on the show. It's been wonderful to chat again. I had a blast when I was on your LinkedIn Live coffee chat, and this has been just as much fun, if not more. So thanks for sharing your journey with us and your relationship with failure and teaching us all about embracing failure as feedback and as a gift, actually.
Well, Jürgen, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and inviting me to your podcast. And I truly hope that this will be valuable to your listeners. And yeah, just thank you so much for this conversation. It's always Absolutely lovely talking to you.
Thanks, Miha. I hope you enjoyed that wonderfully engaging and informative conversation with Miha and took something away from his episode today. I particularly like Miha's approach to turning off the autopilot reaction to events and his approach to being mindful in the moment to see the choices that we have. I'd love to know what you took away from Miha's episode. Leave a comment below the blog post, which you can find at innovabiz.co/Miha Matlievski. That is MIHA-MATLIEVSKI. All lowercase, all one word, innovabiz.co/Miha Matlievski. You'll also find contact information there for getting in touch with Miha, as well as links to the Fail Coach website, to Miha's social media pages, and the other resources we spoke about in our conversation today. If you like this episode, please don't keep it to yourself. Do share it with at least 2 other people, maybe even more, that it might help. Tag me in on that share and I'll reach out to you with a special thank you. Miha suggested that we have a conversation with Brendan Kumarasamy, who has previously appeared on episode 373 on a future InnovaBuzz podcast. So we'll invite Brendan back to talk about good communication. Brendan, keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Miha Matlievski this time. Tune in again to the next episodes of the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we've got yet more fantastic guests lined up, including cultivator of curiosity, Lauren Yee, and Wade Galt of the 3-Day Weekend Club. Thanks for listening to this episode. Make sure you subscribe to the show to be reminded of new episodes. It's free to subscribe. Leave a review if you like. Even if you don't like me, I'm okay with that. I'm asking you to leave a review because it helps other people find this show. Go to innovabiz.co to join our marketing transformation community and access a free gift my team and I made for you. It's the Marketing Master Mini Class. We want to give you everything you need to transform your marketing into a human-centered, relationship-focused growth engine. Until next time, I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBiz. Remember, be awesome and keep innovating.